Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of What You Talking About. This week's guest is Josh Woolley, owner of Mammoth Training Methods and coach to Jack Farlow and current second fittest woman on Earth, Emma Lawson. It is such a great chat and was so fun to find out about Josh himself discovered CrossFit, plus the potential he saw in Emma, leading to her standing on the CrossFit Games podium, both as a teen and an individual. This episode is sponsored by Ascend Apparel and Fitness, a UK-based gymwear business who pride themselves on strong values and a mission to raise awareness of mental health through fitness. Their mindset of grow, build, ascend applies to both physical and mental fitness, about developing skills, resilience, and ascending your own overall well-being. Check them out on Instagram and online and use WOD10 at checkout for 10% off. As always, don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to be the first to hear all about our new episodes and content. Enjoy! Josh, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Leah. I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. It's so nice to have someone I've actually met physically in person.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen often. Obviously, we got to meet at FitFest, which seems like ages ago now, but December. How was that experience like for you guys? Obviously, you came over with Emma Lawson and Jack Farlow. How was all that for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was nice being in an event that wasn't really super competitive for them, much more low key. And as a coach, like it was nice not to have kind of that stress of making sure everything is just perfect for them. They kind of had free reign with that, but it was like a really cool environment. It was really cool to see the athletes be able to like mingle with all the fans, and yeah, we'd definitely do it again if we ever got invited. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, and I assume you are just back from Wadapalooza and lots of cool things. What this time of year is always a bit random because there's stuff that goes on. Obviously, we have Wadapalooza, we have the holiday season, the Opens looming. Like for a coach and like a programmer, how is this time of year for you? Like, do you feel super busy? Is it just a lot of prep?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like I feel like super busy. Like we lay out a plan usually after the games. So what's the plan for the season? And we build things out from there. So, with Jack, we had the discussion, okay, like where do you want to compete in the off season? Do you want to compete in the off season? And we decided on Wadapalooza. So we put a plan in place for that. For Emma, she had Rogue. So we put a plan in place for that. And then once those events ended, then you start more so just kind of focusing on the remainder of the season, and making sure that we're prepared for the touch points in the Open, quarterfinals, and then semifinals as well. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like crazy busy. Do the work up front and have the plan in place, and things are usually pretty good.
Love that. And obviously we'll dive into a lot about Emma and Jack because they both had the last few years has obviously just been incredible for the two of them and yourself. But I would love to know like your journey. Like, how did you find CrossFit and get into CrossFit yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up playing ice hockey as most Canadian boys do, and then ended up going to university and playing hockey there. And then once I graduated, I decided I didn't really want to continue pursuing a professional career within hockey, but still wanted to do something, right? And I remember being in our dressing room kind of lounge with the hockey team, and seeing on ESPN, it was the what year was it at the games? They were doing like the Camp Pendleton run, so it was like a really long run, and I think it was like Rich or like Jason Khalipa on the screen, and like these guys are just like totally shredded and like doing crazy things. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And that was kind of like my first taste of what CrossFit was. And then I kind of right from there got involved in the gym within my hometown and kind of took off from there. So I spent probably the first like 3 or 4 years trying to compete and be competitive. Was never really able to crack too close to regionals at that time. Was close on a team once, but never really could make that jump into the next level. And I got into coaching and started with coaching classes, and really enjoyed that. And then eventually Emma came along, saw her at the gym doing the open workout, even though she was too young. and crushing it. And I was like, you should think about doing this, full time, like professionally, if you wanted to. And I'd be your coach. And I was just like joking around. But like we are where we're at now, right? Because of that conversation. So yeah, that was kind of my, soiree into CrossFit, and then how I got into coaching from there.
Yeah. Did you ever like see yourself as a coach, like before when you first started? Because I always think some people I think are quite like natural leaders and natural coaches. Like, did you feel that it was quite organic for you going in that direction, I suppose?
I think when I first started, no. But once I got more involved within the community and making relationships at the gym, it was kind of like a natural just progression and evolution. To be like a games coach and coaching games athletes, like that was never anything that I really foresaw. So yeah, like yes and no, I guess, to answer your question. Like, I definitely saw myself coaching classes and doing things like that. But to get to the point where it's at now, I don't think I really fully expected that to happen. Obviously it's been amazing, but it was never like something that I was like, oh yeah, like I definitely want to be a game coach. Right?
Yeah. So we'll talk about Emma because, as you say, like it's shaped, I assume, your career, right? Her career has kind of gone hand in hand with yours. So you've kind of just explained, but is that the first experience you had, like seeing her do an open workout in the gym when she wasn't meant to? Like, how did your paths first cross?
Yeah, so her parents were members at the gym that I trained at and coached at. And she would come in and do kids classes and like the odd adult class and just kind of jump in. And she always had like a natural ability and um, natural athletic ability to do things. She was a dancer at the point in time, so she was like really, really small, but like she was still able to move, relatively decent loads for her size and move them fairly well. So that was kind of my first introduction. And then when she did that open workout, I was like, wow, like, she could be like really good if she really focused in on it. And to kind of go back on that story, like I told her, I'm like, hey, you should quit dance and do this full time. Her mom didn't like that very much, but she ended up quitting dance, and I think it was a good decision.
I think that's because there's so many like, what was she at that time? 12, 13-ish?
Yeah, she would have been 13 because the first year they can do the open, I think, is 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was 13. Yeah.
Wow. And like not many 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls when you're like, no, you need to quit dance. Many people are going to listen to you.
Yeah, and I literally said it like in a joking manner. I never thought it would come to anything, but yeah, it did. So
Yeah. How, like, I love talking about kind of teen athletes and coaching them as well, because I suppose when you're an elite athlete in your 20s or 30s or whatever, and it becomes a job for you, that's one thing. But being like a teenager and so much happening, and you've got school and not many teenagers have jobs, etc., how do you kind of position coaching someone who is just doing it for fun, who has so much potential that you're like, well, we can start shaping your career now and start, your journey now? How does that work when they're so young? Like, do you do
yeah.
a whole kind of, obviously you program a lot for them, but like
Yeah.
overall, how does it work?
So it was something entirely new for me at that point in time. Like I had never coached an individual athlete, let alone like a teenager who's just literally starting out in the sport. Um, it definitely took a lot of learning and a lot of patience, both with Emma, but also like with myself, and understanding that like, we're going to try things and they may not work out. And how do we learn from them and continue to progress forward? Um, so like from the training side of things, like we definitely had some conversations at the beginning with their parents and saying like, hey, like, if this is what she wants, like this is kind of what to expect in terms of training volume, and like here are the things that we need to look out for in terms of like burning out and just making sure that we're not overdoing it, because again, like everyone wants things like right away, like they want that immediate gratification. But the sport of CrossFit, like you definitely need to be in it for the long haul. And things take time to develop, right? Like you can't force, you know, hormones and puberty in people, right? Like those things are just going to happen naturally. And just like you can't force, strength gains and aerobic development, like you have to give those time to develop. So there was a lot of conversations with that. And then as time went on, like we became pretty close in terms of like a, coach mentor kind of role. And dealing with different things outside of the gym, right? Like dealing with high school and drama there, and like Emma being kind of the odd one out. Like no one at her high school really, first of all, knew what CrossFit was, but like here's this girl who's super strong, looks different than everyone, is eating different lunches at school, and like doesn't go to McDonald's and get a burger and fries. So there was definitely some times that she struggled with finding the right friend group and the people to support her, and so helping her navigate through that, just based on like past experience and just being a little bit older and understanding that like this is, it's not always fair, but like these are things that like you'll work through and they'll make you better in the long run. And now like as she's older, dealing with the external pressures of feeling like she needs to constantly be one-upping her last achievement, and dealing with things like that, and just like the pressures of competing, but also making sure that she's still enjoying being a teenager, right? Like she just turned 19. She obviously wants to be training all the time, but it's like, hey, like you want to go out for your birthday, like you can, like go out, enjoy yourself, be smart, but like don't feel like you need to just completely shield yourself off from being a normal person as well. So
it's crazy to think she's still only 19, and it's like watching her. And I think whenever I watch the teen division, like I think I forget, like you'll go, oh my gosh, these people are so young. She was it 14, which she was when she went to her first games, right? Obviously.
Was she 14? Yeah, she would have been, yes, she would have been 14. So she would have just turned 14 the January prior to those games.
How, like, as you say, you coach her through a lot in life. When you're then put on like a kind of global stage at that age, what role do you play that weekend? And I'm sure your role has possibly changed over the years as the competitions evolved, but like going into that first games, because it was your first games, hers, at such a young age but at such an elite level, like what role do you try and play throughout that weekend?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I was trying to do is just like provide a like an even keel, just energy, right? Like not trying to get too high or too low, and just understanding that like the ebbs and flows of competition can be really, really good at one point, but like really, really bad at the next. And you need to be able to like enjoy those moments. It's okay to suffer a little bit in those other moments, but bring it back to that level kind of homeostatic spot. So I think that was my biggest kind of role the first year. Other like outside of like warming up strategy and stuff like that, but it was really just being like that calming presence, because you're a 14-year-old kid walking into this like huge environment. There's hundreds of people. The people that you look up to in your training are there working out and competing, and it's just quite the experience. So again, just helping with that from the mental side of things was probably like the biggest role that I think I played in the first year.
Yeah. And then fast forward, like obviously she's now, I mean, a second Fittest on Earth, which is a whole other experience. But I'm actually going to ask from a programming perspective, I suppose. The leap from team to individual is pretty big for an athlete. But from a coaching perspective and a programming perspective, how much has your role changed over the years, jumping from that team division into the elite individuals?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like the programming perspective has changed too much. Like obviously there's been a lot more focus on her specific weaknesses, because things that necessarily weren't weaknesses in the team division are weaknesses now in the elite division or the individual division. and one of the main thing just being strength, right? Like her body weight to strength ratio is very, very good, but she's giving up a lot of strength to some of these other athletes who are more mature than she is. And so that was kind of our big focus, is like, how do we build strength in a smart way in someone who's still developing, like their body's still developing, right? So being smart with that, doing, a lot of research and just making sure that, we're trying to find the best things that are going to work for her, and making sure that the lines of communication between, her and myself and her parents are wide open. So that way, if things are maybe heading in the wrong direction, we can really act on that quickly and try to redirect in the right direction. So I would say things have worked out pretty well. Like her first year as an individual, definitely towards the end of the competition, like you could see it was starting to wear on her, and just her strength endurance kind of started to falter. But last year I think her strength was right where it needed to be. Like she finished sixth or seventh in the Olympic total. So like she's definitely closing that gap, which is really good.
It's so impressive. And there's a lot of talk. I think there was this kind of era of teenagers, like, Emma being in it, and Mal and Emma Carey and Olivia, like this kind of bunch of girls that kind of all came up at the same time. Do you think that her being in the same experience as some of the others helps, because they've got people that they can relate to, instead of these girls that have maybe been competing individual for 5-6 years?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think one thing that, when Mal and Emma Carey made it their first year, Emma did the Atlas semifinal. It was online. She finished ninth in that, so she was very close to qualifying as a 16-year-old. The realization that like Mal and Emma Carey did it was like, hey, like it's possible, right? Like it can be done. So I think that kind of helped, knowing that like she competed with those girls growing up, that if they can do it, she could do it as well. So definitely helped.
It's so crazy to think. And do you ever think, from a kind of this, obviously you're going to maybe be biased towards Emma, but in terms of other individuals that have maybe been come into it as a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, etc., do you ever think there's a slight like unfairness almost, that these girls have got a load of competition experience already from being teenagers? Or do you think it is completely different divisions? Like how different is it? Because obviously it's not unfair because they've trained for it, but having, like, when you look at some individuals who may be like, oh, these young'uns have got loads of experience already, do you ever think there's like a slight element of there's a bit of a disparity?
Yes and no. Like I think the fact that they have competition experience is obviously very good for them. Being in Madison for multiple years and like knowing what the environment's like, knowing what the venue's like, definitely gives them, I would say, like a bit of a competitive advantage, because they kind of know what they're walking into, versus someone who's 24, 25, and it's their first time kind of breaking through and making it to the games. It's a brand new thing for them, right? And so although they're older and maybe have been through some other life experiences, like they still haven't experienced that, and haven't competed at that level or that stage. So yeah, I definitely think there's some advantage there. I don't think it makes a huge difference. But if I had to choose, I'd rather have the experience than not.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, if I ever have children, they're going to be doing CrossFit like 8 years old. Sorry, guys. And I spoke. So this year, I want to talk. Obviously, Emma is, you've been coaching her for a long time, but Jack is in the picture as well. And of course, the last year in particular for him has been obviously so incredible. He made the games for the first time. We'll talk a little bit more about him, but in terms of the games last year, how different was it for you going from having like one athlete there to two? Like, how much did your role change, if at all?
It was busy. Yeah, it was definitely busy. I had help. So Jack's brother-in-law, who was kind of like helping him out when he was younger, had Jack's coach's pass. So he was helping kind of do those things, right? Carry the bag, help with his warm-ups, and stuff, so which took some pressure off of me. But always like kind of being aware of like, hey, like Emma's going now, so I need to make sure like we're talking about strategy at this point, and then Jack's going, 45 minutes later, so I need to make sure that when Emma's done, she's cooling down. I'm gonna go talk to Jack and kind of go back and forth and just make sure that they have what they need in terms of being ready to go for the event. Um, it made for very long days and a lot of steps. I think yeah, I think I set some records that weekend in terms of the number of steps I made, but it was great. Like I wouldn't change it for anything. Like it's a lot. It's very mentally draining by the end. Like you're pretty exhausted, but it's great to see them, achieve goals that they've put in place and be part of that has been really great.
Yeah. And did kind of going back a little bit, how
Mhm.
did your relationship with Jack start? How did you come to be that you were going to start coaching him as well?
Yeah, so the first time I met Jack was the first year that Emma was competing as a teenager, so 14. He had come to the gym that we were training at because we had some sandbags that he wanted to use. And so that was the first time that I met him. And I vividly remember saying that Emma was too good for him, and that like yeah, just kind of like that you're too good for him, like stay away from him. Just joking around, right? Like just kind of teasing her a little bit. um but then like seeing him at the games that year and talking with his brother-in-law and kind of making a relationship there was kind of the start. And then him and Emma ended up doing some partner competitions locally, and that was kind of the start of that relationship there. I still was a little bit, I guess, protective of Emma because I'm like, oh, this boy's coming in, and like, I don't know, like, is he going to be a good fit for Emma? But honestly, like, they've been a perfect match, not only within the gym, but also outside of the gym in terms of how they balance each other and how they support each other. It's really, really cool to see, especially for people who are young, right? Like they haven't been through a lot of things as an adult in life. Like, I mean, Emma just turned 19, so um, they still have a lot of things to learn about life, but how they support each other um, and how they communicate with each other is much more mature than, you know, I was definitely doing when I was 21 or 19 years old. So, kudos to them on that. They're definitely like a really good pair for each other. So, yeah.
And they are just two of the nicest people. Like as you know, I got to spend some time with them at FitFest, and I was just in awe of how just kind of gentle but mature, and they're just really really good humans. And I love that you kind of talk about the support and everything. I think I remember you posting something after the games about the fact that like there's no jealousy either. And I think, as you say, particularly their age, were you ever worried that perhaps because obviously Emma has done so well, there was going to be that aspect of perhaps a little bit of envy over her success?
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if you were to ask Jack, he probably would say, like, yeah, there was some times when there was a bit of envy, but it was always very, very short-lived. And I think that's a very natural thing to have. Like, if you are doing something that you want really, really badly, and someone else, achieves that, you're gonna have a bit of envy. Like, you're gonna feel a little bit of jealousy there. Um, but like, it never impacted how he treated Emma or how he celebrated Emma's success. It was more so, I would say, like motivation and fuel that he used to continue driving his progression and development in the sport. Um, yeah, and it was never anything that I really was concerned about. Like you said, Emma and Jack are two really, really nice people. Um, they're very, very humble in terms of what they've accomplished and how they compose and hold themselves in public. Um, so yeah, like I've never had any concerns in terms of jealousy because of one's success over the other. Right.
I love that. And then so when you're in the gym and you've got these like two competitive athletes, obviously I talk about it quite a lot on here because I feel that there has been, particularly maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, a real rise of like training camps. And you've almost got like your own mini training camp, right, with those two. Have you noticed a difference from when they train together? Like, do you find that they're competitive, but it kind of helps their training? Like, what's the dynamic in training sessions?
Yeah, so I only typically am in person with them once to twice a week. Like I have a full-time job outside of this, so the coaching stuff is definitely like a side hustle, and Mammoth is the side hustle that it's kind of umbrellaed under. Emma and Jack's training is very individualized, so they seldomly are doing similar pieces at the same time. Obviously, like leading up to the games and semifinals, like we'll do some mock runs and stuff, and like they'll have training there, and there's definitely some competition between them. It's a healthy competition, and there's the understanding that like, you know what, like if we're doing a rowing workout, Jack's going to win every single time because again, like for the most part, guys are going to be able to row better than girls. And so there's that understanding there, but it definitely drives both of them within training. But for the most part of the year, like they're doing their own thing. They might be in the gym at the same time, but they're not doing similar things at those points in time, just because their weaknesses are very much polar opposite. And Jack's in school, right? So Jack's in biomedical engineering, so his schedule is crazy. So yeah, when they can train together, they train together, but they're not doing the same thing.
Do you ever get time to train yourself?
I do. I've actually, it's been sporadic. Like obviously having a little one makes things a little bit more challenging. She is 2.5 now, so things are starting to get a little bit more stable, which is good. I just recently, I am launching like a 60-minute training program that's just for the everyday athlete. That's coming out on the 29th. But I've been like doing the training 2 weeks ahead just to like make sure things are the way I expect, and have that kind of level of consistency. And it's been good. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been training every day. But up to that point, it was pretty sporadic for a while.
Yeah. And I was going to kind of ask you that. How do you, because obviously coaching games athletes is no mean feat, and there must be a lot of pressure on you. But how do you prioritize kind of your work and family, like training, coaching other people? Like, how do you, how do you fit it all in? But how do you prioritize it all as well?
Yeah, it definitely is a balancing act. I have a very understanding and supportive wife who knows that like I thoroughly enjoy doing this. Um, if I could do it full time, I definitely would. However, like my job is very stable, it's very secure, have benefits and a pension, and so like it's really hard to kind of give that up. But if I can continue to grow Mammoth to the point where one day I can, then that's definitely something that we'll cross that bridge at that point in time. But it's definitely like tiered. So like Emma, Jack, and I are a team, and like I'm not going to let anything outside of my family life and my work kind of impact that team. And so it's been a very slow, gradual build. And I always make sure that if I'm adding something, it's not taking away from the others, because those other things are the most important. So again, like this year, we rolled out an elite program, which was to kind of share my philosophies in terms of how you train elite athletes. Yeah, and so it's been successful. I think it's definitely opened eyes to a lot of people that, oh, maybe this isn't really what I want to do. Like it's a lot of work. But it's been a good kind of learning lesson for me in terms of how to kind of develop a program for people, and how to manage my time in terms of running a business, but also having a full-time job outside of it. So it's been really good in that sense. And now kind of coming out with more of an everyday athlete program, which I have some help with that in terms of programming, but it's it's just been like a very gradual, slow build. And there's definitely been opportunities to bring on other athletes and coach them. And like I've had other games athletes reach out to me, and like semifinal athletes, and it's always the same answer, right? Like it's like, no, like I'm not taking on any individual athletes right now. But the reality is like I'm not going to let anyone come in and interfere with the team that Emma and Jack and I have created. there's a lot of trust there and a lot of commitment between us three. So yeah.
Do you feel that as the years have gone on and obviously they've both progressed, do you feel more pressure as their coach?
I don't necessarily feel like pressure in terms of their performance or outcome. The pressure that I do feel is like making sure they have the tools to best express their fitness, or improve on the things they need to improve on. So at the end of the day, like when they compete, the position they get is the position that they end up with, as long as they are, doing their best and executing to the best of their ability. Like there's really nothing you can do outside of that. But yeah, like the pressure is more so in making sure that the plan is in place and that it is going the way we're hoping and intending. And if it's not, then how do we pivot, and pivot quickly to make sure that it is going on that trajectory that we want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you said earlier in the episode, you were talking about how at the end of the games, that's where you kind of sit down and plan for the next season. So what, again, we're kind of at the start of the season now, but do you feel like the start of the season, or do you feel like your season starts when the games finish?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely doesn't start right when they finish. Like there's definitely a period of time where things really just go into nothing for a while, which is good. Like you need it. The athletes definitely need it. With them being younger, they may not need it physically for too long, but the mental side of things, like they definitely need that break. But yeah, the season kind of for them, I would say like starts probably like a month and a half after the games, depending on, what their competition schedule is going to be like. Right. So I think Emma took about a month, where we didn't like do any like structured programming. And then we got back into it for Rogue. And then after Rogue took another couple of weeks. And then from that point kind of have gotten back into a plan. So yeah, from like a competitive athlete, games level athlete, like the season doesn't start when the open starts, like it starts much earlier. And we like to call that kind of like the build phase, right? Like that's when you're really working on those weaknesses and building those up.
Yeah. And so obviously the rest of the season is among us. It's going to be here well before we know it.
Yeah.
Do you set goals for what they want to achieve, or what you want to achieve as a coach? Like what does it kind of look like laying it out from now through to the games?
Yeah, so we definitely set goals at the beginning of the year, like at the beginning of the training year. um I'm not a fan, and I try to encourage Emma and Jack not to set goals based on like a placement, right? Like I don't want you to say, like, okay, let's look at Emma for example, because it's easy. Like legitimate goals, like, well, I want to win. It's like, yeah, like that's a great goal to have, right? But the reality is that there's only one, or I want to do better than I did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, in order to do that, you have to win, right? And so there's only one spot to go up. So like reframing those, it's like, okay, like if you want to win, what do you have to do on a daily basis or on a weekly basis in order to achieve that? And make those your goals, right? Make those smaller micro goals the goals that you're going to focus on, and that outcome at the end is going to be the outcome regardless, right? Like you can't control the programming, you can't control illness or injuries, like if things happen. And so if you're setting your goal based on a position and an outcome and an event, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, at least in my opinion, right? And especially within young athletes who haven't had that life experience necessarily with like disappointment and not achieving something, it can be really difficult, right? Like if they set a goal and they don't achieve it, it's like, oh no, like I'm a failure. It's like, well, no, like you're not a failure. Like look at all the work you did to get to that point and really try to put things in perspective, right? So we do set goals. We try to make them not as like positional based and stuff like that, but more so, hey, like let's work on your strength. Let's work on, getting more sleep and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you come second, you've got it. If you're going to go up, there is only one spot.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it's not that I don't want, and again, we'll stick with Emma because it's like an easier example. It's like not that I don't want her to want to win. Like, I definitely want her to want to win. And I think any athlete who's competing at this level needs to have the belief and the desire to win. I just don't want her to put all the emphasis on winning, because again, like at the end of the day, like if you win, amazing accomplishment. It's great. As soon as you put that medal on, it's kind of done. Like, yeah, you did it. So like what's next? Like what's coming next year? Um, and so yeah, having goals that aren't necessarily aligned with that, I think is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What when because you obviously talk about programming within like events that
Mhm.
out of anyone's control, apart from obviously the programmers. Do you ever like when a workout's announced or anything? Are you ever like, oh my god, no, like this is not what we want? Or as a coach, you just like, no, okay, right, we're gonna sit, we're gonna analyze it. This is maybe not going to be your event, but this is how we're gonna attack it. Is there ever like a bit of a fear going in, like waiting for workouts to be released at competitions and things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's natural to have a fear of the unknown, and like CrossFit's all about being the unknown and unknowable, right? Again, I try not to like let them see that, like that I might be nervous about an event. But when things are announced, like, yeah, we'll just take a look and digest it and analyze it and figure out, okay, like, yeah, this might be a damage control event, or this is somewhere where you can really like drop the hammer and kind of send a statement. Um, but also like within their programming, like we try to be very well rounded in terms of what we're working on. So there really hasn't been anything that's been like too crazy that I was like, I don't think they're going to be able to do this. Like for the most part, everything's been pretty good. I think the only time I had any concern was the event in Emma's first year, where it was the skill medley with like the double under cross and then the parallel press to handstand. I'm like, like we'd never done double under crosses. It's like, okay, like maybe you can figure that out on the fly, but like good luck with the press to handstand. Like if you get there, great. So yeah. And then at that point, it's not like a pressure thing, or it's just like, well, have fun if you get there. Like, right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's adapting, isn't it? And I mean, I think from a spectator's view, that event was just so interesting because
Mhm.
you don't know how much time the people have had to practice or anything, and you're kind of watching thinking, oh my gosh, like half of these people,
Yeah.
top 1% of people, athletes in the world, can't do this. So how
Yeah.
hard is it?
And it was broadcast on ESPN live. And it's just like, oh, that's probably not a good look, but whatever. It's okay.
This is the stuff we want to show.
Yeah.
I just really quickly before I let you go, I am gonna do some quick fire questions, but I want to really quickly mention Whatappalooza because Jack obviously competed as an individual and in a team,
Mhm.
and what a performance for him! Like, how proud were you of him that weekend?
Yeah, super proud. Like obviously his outcome there was amazing. When we sat down after the games and kind of put a plan in place for the year, we decided on Whatappalooza because there was enough runway to really focus on attacking his weaknesses, right? And obviously strength is his weakness. Like he's very, very strong. Um, but the games definitely illustrated that he lacked that aerobic capacity that he needs in order to be competitive at the top level. Um, and so we put a plan in place and like he stuck with it. And how he's very analytical in how he approaches things. He's a lot like Brent Fikowski in that sense. He loves data, he loves metrics. Um, and so yeah, like to see how he focused in and like we progressed through 3 or 4 months of like really solid training, and how he balanced that with school, for him to have that outcome was phenomenal. But also like more than the outcome was how he attacked and approached workouts that if they would have shown up at the games would have been really tough and difficult for him. He attacked those with confidence, and he knew that, hey, like I can do this, like I'm not worried about it. And the results showed, right? And so to think that we still have, you know, 6-ish, 7 months, like almost double the time we had leading up to Wadapalooza, to now train and focus for the games. Like it's really something amazing. So yeah, super proud of him, super excited for his future in the sport.
Absolutely. It was very, very fun to watch. Okay, cool. Thank you for that, Josh. I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you before you go.
Okay.
Everyone has to answer them. You can answer them as an athlete, as a coach, as a spectator, however you like.
Okay.
Favorite lift?
Snatch.
Nice. Favorite overall movement?
Ring muscle up.
Nice. I've done 2 podcasts today and they are the exact same answers, so that they are the person. Favorite benchmark WOD?
Amanda. It's got a snatch and ring muscle up.
And again, you don't have to answer this as a coach. You could do it as who you'd want to go with. But if you could build a dream team for the games, who would you have on it?
A dream team for the games. Well, I would have to go with Emma and Jack for starters, just because I'm biased. Team of 4, right? So 2 and 2. Who else? I think we gotta go with Vellner. It's a tough one between Vellner and Fikowski. I think I'm gonna go with Vellner though. Vellner's a funny dude. And then another girl. That's tough. There's a lot of good ones. I don't know. It's a tough one. I might go with like Danielle Brandon, just because I think she'll like just bring the cool factor.
Yeah.
And she's a good athlete, so I think that'd be a really cool team.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Josh. I'm looking forward to seeing obviously you guys throughout the season and how you'll get on. I'm sure it's going to be another amazing season for you all. But thank you for your time and for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot, Leah. Appreciate it.